Dusty, have you ever gone on a hunting trip?
Well, yeah.
You pack all your stuff. Let's say you're driving to New Hampshire. Let's say I'm driving to Ohio, and you're hunting for 4, 5, 6 days. What's the biggest challenge you usually have?
You're going to stop multiple times and get gas, and I worry about odor the whole way.
It's always in the back of your head. After talking to our friend Tim Gothier, we realized that there's a better solution that is portable. And that solution is called the ScentLock Enforcer. This nifty little device, about the size of an iPhone, it produces ozone. Ozone is this naturally occurring O3 molecule that actually naturally removes odors, kills bacteria, binds to all kinds of odor particles in the air, and basically makes you scent-free instead of like a scent cover-up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
You can put this in your tote. It operates off of a USB and has an 8-hour battery life.
It's the personal ozone generator.
It is the personal ozone generator. If you want to check it out, go to ScentLockEnforcer.com. That's ScentLock Enforcer.com. Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, powered by ScentLock Enforcer, episode number 174. Sam Ubl. Keep the deer guessing. Ground hunting the thick stuff, and the importance of fresh sign. Please support our sponsors as they make this show possible. Today's show is sponsored by the ScentLock Enforcer, the Euro Hanger, and Morse's Sporting Goods. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hey, this is Bob Dumong from the Buckhorn Boat Dog, listening to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hi, this is John Salone with Interviews with the Masters podcast. And when I'm not editing my own podcast, I'm listening to the Big Buck Registry with Jay Scott.
This is Neil Pendleton of Southern New Hampshire, and I killed the 1490 buck. That's 1,490 days of hunting a 192-inch, 22-point, 10.5-year-old buck. You can too if you listen to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. Once again, I am here to say thank you for pushing that play button on your audio device, your phone, you're in your car, on your computer, wherever you're listening to the show. I got to say thank you from the studios of the Big Buck Registry. Thank you for listening and tuning in as we go about dissecting the habits of world-class deer hunters so that you can learn from it and use it too. And when I say we, I mean me and my good friend and co-host, Dusty Phillips from Ohio. What's happening, Dusty?
That's enough about deer stacking hunt. The rut is here, Jay.
The rut is on. And what are you witnessing right now in Ohio with the rut being on?
Oh, the scrapes are tore up from the floor up. Like they're literally digging 6-8 inch 4-foot round circles. I sent you a picture the other day, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there was massive just earth digging going on. It's like excavation.
It's amazing, dude. It really is. I'll tell you what, definitely the chase phase is pretty much wrapped up. I think they're locked down right now.
Yep.
Here in Ohio, the temperatures rise to around 70 degrees. That's terrible for the rut. Mm-hmm. But I think this Saturday, today, the podcast release, I think it's going to be one of the hottest days of the season here in Ohio because of the fact that it's going to be 40 degrees as a high, like 27 as a low on Friday night. There's a cold front coming in Friday. I think it's going to be rocking and rolling Saturday morning. If you ain't in the woods today, there's something bad wrong with you.
Yeah, it sounds like, you get that temperature drop in the middle of the peak mating season. It's not the chasing phase like you mentioned. This is now full on mating season, and they're locked in. They're locked down. They know where they are. They've got their territories, and they're just getting busy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And I think right now, skirting along the edge of a bedding area where them big bucks are going to just come by to give the bedding area a smell and see what kind of activity, if there's a hot doe in the area, in that bedding area. I think if you set up along a major corridor that they're traveling pretty regularly throughout the day, I think if you're set up right next to a bedding area, let's say 20, 30 yards off of it, if you can get that close, do it. And I think it's going to happen for you if you stick your butt in that seat and wait it out.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've been there before, and I mean, you always hope that your experience from the past occur again, and maybe this time will be a bigger deer than the last time, and so on and so on.
You had the big bright moon come in this past week, and
the super moon.
The super moon come in and kind of messed up a little bit there. The warmer temperatures hit with that super moon passing, and now we got some temperatures that are up in the 70s, and I think it's knocked it out for a little bit here. But I think as soon as this cold front sets in, it's going to be full-blown breed time. Yeah. And if you see a doe that's hot, it's going to have a buck right behind her.
Right. Yeah, I think the temperatures don't necessarily stop them from, breeding, but I think it keeps the does locked down from traveling.
Yeah, oh yeah, they got their winter coats on, Jay. I could agree with that more too. They're not quite in motion as they usually are during this period of time.
Right. They're hanging tight until those temperatures cool down in the evening. Then they'll move. Bucks will move with them, but they're not going to move during the middle of the heat of the day. Right,
that super moon, I was seeing people that were capitalizing on hunting from 11 to dark. And
right.
A lot of people is reporting that there is a lot of buck activity right after lunchtime.
There you go. It's this time of year that I notoriously find a buck running up through the dam spillway right around 12 noon, and you can start at one end and it's like running the gauntlet. And why I don't hang out there every day around noontime through the peak rut, I have no idea, but I really should just sit right in the middle, because they've got nowhere to go. Once they get into that gauntlet, they have to go straight up the gut, and it's wide open. But I can't tell you how many times I've actually witnessed this over the years. Right around 12 noon, big buck pops out of the woodwork and just goes meandering up the spillway. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's a great pinch point, that spillway. Fortunately, I've seen that, dude, and I know exactly where you're at there.
Yep.
We call that the KZ, the kill zone. The rut is hot, and you just never know. It's the mystery right now. You may have all your bucks that's in your area pinpointed, but this next, I'm going to say 5 to 10 days, that mystery buck is going to pass through your setup. You're going to be like, what buck's that? Man, I've never seen that buck before. And it's happening this past week. It's going to happen the following week, and maybe a few days after that. Opportunity is now if you're going to get that mystery buck to come through.
That is a fact. Absolutely. Dusty, I wanted to shift gears here and just talk a little bit about this little project we've got going on. I didn't expect it to kind of become this project, but it has. And when we had Bob Dumong, my friend from North Carolina, on a couple of weeks ago, we talked a lot about tree stand safety, and Bob had fallen out of a tree stand, and he's a big advocate of super tree stand safety harnesses and techniques these days, because he did fall and could have killed himself and really messed up his leg bad. But since that show, we have been sending out any of our spare harnesses to our friends of the Big Buck Registry who are listening to the show. I've sent out a couple. Jim recently sent out a couple. And our latest is from Taryn Rodenborg. And he writes, "Hi guys, first off, I want to say thank you for the great content you provide on your weekly podcast. My 11-year-old son and I listen almost every week since we found you 6 months ago. And we are a little strapped for cash to buy the harnesses, allow us the ability to hunt from elevated stands. I've hunted for 22 years, sometimes elevated, and I have never used a safety harness, and I would love to teach my son the correct way to be safe when elevated. Not one person from my group uses them, and we have never had an accident, but the thought has always been in the back of my mind. I'm hoping once we or someone else from the group uses them, that changes the mind of the others in my group. I would sincerely appreciate it if you could send 2 harnesses to me." He said, "Thank you so much. You may have saved our lives in the future and changed the mind of fellow hunters from our group and around the world. Feel good about that." So we sent out a couple, and Taryn did receive it. In fact, I've got 2 left. Dusty, how many do you have in your inventory at this point?
I think I've got 2 left, Jay. And actually, I'm sending out one should be on its way by this point in time. Had another guy shoot a request in needing a harness himself.
Gotcha. Okay, so I've got 2 left. You've got 1, it sounds like, and Jim's out. He may have a few more. But if you would like one of the ones that we have left, shoot us an email. Jay at Big Buck Registry, Jim at Big Buck Registry, or Dusty at BigBuckRegistry.com. And we will get you out one of our spare harnesses that we have that came with our tree stands. And the reason we're sending them out, not because we're not using a harness ourselves, is that we all have our other harnesses that we bought. But each stand these days comes with a spare. So if you don't have one and you need one and you can't afford it, whatever, just shoot us an email and we'll get one out to you.
One I've got going out is going out to Ted Schmidt.
Ted Schmidt. Very cool.
His read, "Hey there, loving the podcast. My name is Ted Schmidt. I'm brand spanking new to hunting, and I have pieced together my hunting gear, which includes my stand. If you and Jay still have a harness, I could surely use it. My wife always worries enough about me going to the woods alone with us having a newborn baby. So we're going to get one out to Ted."
That's awesome. Well, as you can see, this little suggestion that we made has turned into a little project. So if you have a request or you have a need for these harnesses, these spare harnesses, let us know. But if you have some to donate, we can use some too, because I think this is going to carry on as we try to distribute harnesses to those that don't have them but really should have them. So that's what's going on with the Strap Project. So, Dusty, this week we have a guest by the name of Sam Ubl, and Sam is part of the Whitetail Adrenaline group. And as you know, the Whitetail Adrenaline group, Jared Scheffler, he's been on the show a couple times now. And they're just a fantastic group of hunters. They hunt on the ground, they hunt public land, they hunt with their bow and arrows, and they actually kill big deer year in, year out. And they put a lot of effort and a lot of smart hunting into what they do. And I'm always fascinated with what they can do without a lot of scent control, without lots of fancy gear, without lots of fancy camouflage. It's mind-boggling what they do. I mean, they talk about, as Jared had once said, they went to Walmart and bought some jeans and spray painted them for camouflage.
It's amazing, ain't it? Don't they call it snooking?
Right, snooking for whitetail. So Sam is part of that group, and he's from Wisconsin, and in and of himself, he's a fantastic hunter, just like the rest of the group is. And he gets together with Jared to hunt whitetails and other members of the Whitetail Adrenaline group. And he's going to tell us his whole story about how he got into it and how he goes about hunting. And this is one of those shows where you probably want to take some notes. You're going to learn how they do it and use the wind to their advantage and get into the thick of the stuff and take canoes out into swamps and find where the big bucks are hanging out during the day. So, but before we get there, let's turn to Jim Keller with the deer news.
The deer news this week is sponsored by the Euro Hanger. You don't have to spend big bucks to hang your big buck. Get yourself a Euro Hanger. Facebook.com/Eurohanger, EUROHANGER.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the deer news. Our first story this week: at what age can a fawn survive without its doe? This story was featured on the Quality Deer Management website and was written by Kip Adams. Harvesting antlerless deer is sometimes necessary to keep deer herds in balance with the habitat. This ensures healthy deer herds, healthy habitat, and a bright future for a wide array of other wildlife species. In addition to the number of antlerless deer shot, the timing of harvest can also have a big impact on the herd and habitat. For example, when antlerless deer are shot early, say in October rather than December, the forage and browse they would have eaten during those 2 months can now be distributed to the remaining population. This can provide more food for other deer that can boost body weights and survival. Some hunters are concerned that taking does early could decrease the survival rates of orphaned fawns. This is a valiant concern, and here's how I decide if the fawn is old enough to survive without its mother. Fawns can be weaned at 10 weeks of age, which is 70 days. You can observe fawns nursing after this time, but I believe it is more of a bonding exercise than a nutritional requirement. In most of the whitetails range, the majority of fawns are born much earlier than the 70 days before hunting season. Most fawns in northern states hit the ground in late May or early June. That means they can be weaned by mid to late August, and our archery seasons don't open until late September or early October. This timing ensures most fawns are plenty old enough to survive on their own before hunting season arrives. However, some fawns are born later, and in more southern locales, fawns are born during numerous months. In these situations, a little deer knowledge can help make a wise harvest decision. A great way to determine in the field whether they're likely old enough to survive is to look for the presence of spots. If a doe has a fawn with spots, give her a pass. However, if a doe is with a fawn and the fawn's spots are gone or are very indistinct, that doe can be taken without any risk to the fawn's survival. Deer tags returned after EHD outbreak. This article was featured on the South Dakota State University's The Collegian website and was written by Mark Sandquist. An outbreak of EHD in South Dakota has caused a voluntary return and refund process for deer hunting licenses in areas impacted by the disease. Historically, EHD has only been seen in southern states, but it has since expanded across much of the whitetail deer range. In recent years, South Dakota has seen variable numbers of EHD-related deaths. 1,674 deer have been reported dead this year alone. This has prompted many South Dakota deer hunters to return their purchased licenses and let deer numbers rebound in their hunting areas. About 600 firearm, archery, youth deer, and muzzleload licenses for the 2016 have been returned to date, but officials expect those numbers to rise. EHD has mainly impacted areas of central and southeastern South Dakota. The 3 counties with the highest number of reported deer deaths this year due to EHD are Brule with 204, Beetle with 179, and Aurora with 157. Although 2016 has seen elevated EHD mortality rates for South Dakota deer, it hasn't been the worst in recent years. The most substantial loss from EHD were seen in 2012 when 3,714 deer were reported dead. For more information on the disease, along with a map showing areas around the state impacted by EHD, look on the South Dakota Game and Fish Department webpage under the deer hunting section. Missouri hunters took more deer than 2015 on opening firearms weekend. This story was originally posted by the KY3 TV website. Preliminary data from the Missouri Department of Conservation shows deer hunters in Missouri harvested 96,131 deer during the opening weekend of the November portion of the fall firearms season on November 12th and 13th. Of the 96,131 deer harvested, 55,753 were antlered bucks, 8,873 were button bucks, and 31,505 were does. Last year, deer hunters checked 93,896 deer during the opening weekend of the 2015 November portion of firearms deer season. Missouri offers some of the best deer hunting in the country, and the deer hunting is an important part of many Missourians' lives and family traditions. Deer hunting is also an important economic driver in Missouri and gives a $1 billion annual boost to the state and local economies. For current ongoing preliminary harvest totals by season, county, and type of deer, visit the Missouri Department of Conservation website. Here's a Second Amendment success story for you. This story was originally posted on the OutdoorHub.com website. The Monday morning commute in Estero, Florida was a little more action-packed than normal after a high-speed chase led to a fatal shooting. Thankfully, there was a good guy with a gun close by who was able to help the police officer in this story. 12-year veteran Deputy First Class Dean Bards was involved in a car chase Monday morning, reaching speeds higher than 120 miles per hour. He chased the suspect from multiple exits before he exited his vehicle and tackled Deputy Bards. As the two men were on the ground fighting, a passerby who had a concealed carry license got out of his vehicle and instructed the suspect to stop and get off the deputy. After non-compliance, the passerby shot the suspect and stopped him from beating Deputy Dean Bards. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks to Jim Keller for the Deer News. Without further ado, here's Sam Ubl.
Sam Ubl, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. What's happening, my friend?
How are you, Jay? It's good to talk to you again.
We set this up a long time ago, and as you know, I'm a big fan of anybody that can strategically take a whitetail on the ground. And you know I'm a huge fan of Whitetail Adrenaline, and you've sent me some of your DVDs, and I'm a huge fan of everything you guys do. So to finally get to talk to you guys in any shape or form is just a pleasure. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I can't wait to get into some of the details on how you do it, because I've some of the videos that I've watched of what you've done, what you go through, is every bit what we like to hear on this podcast. So
Awesome. I sure appreciate that. I'm glad to be here, and thanks for taking the time and inviting me on the show.
cool, man. So where are you at right now, Sam?
I'm in southeast Wisconsin, Waukesha County. That's where I've been born and raised, and I haven't left the nest, I suppose. I mean, I have my own house. Don't get me wrong. It's just I haven't left the vicinity of the area. I love it too much around here.
Gotcha. What draws you to that place?
I don't know if it's just because it's familiarity or what it is, but I guess if a guy was to come hunt in Waukesha County, he'd find that in the southern reaches of it, like where I'm at, it's a lot of tangled mess and swampland. The tangled mess in the hardwoods. What I mean by that is there's a ton of undergrowth, vines and little shoots of different kind of, I guess you'd call them weed trees, without trying to figure out what each of them are called. But it's really dense stuff until you get more to like the northern reaches of the county when it starts to meet Washington County. That's the next county up from me. But then the swampland, I guess that's if I now that I'm kind of talking myself through it, I love hunting marshes and swamps. That's I grew up doing that, and that's my flavor. So I got plenty of that around here to keep me busy.
Gotcha. What's your earliest recollection of deer hunting where you are now?
Well, I don't know if my earliest recollection of deer hunting is necessarily from where I am here now. It really comes down to listening to my dad's stories. My dad got me started in hunting and trapping and fishing from a real young age. I mean, I think younger than maybe most kids are brought up around that. But I know that deer camp was always something that I wanted to be a part of. And to be honest with you, I think I know a little bit more now about his reasons for not letting me come when I was younger than I did then. At that time, he told me you have to get good grades. You had to maintain a certain, make sure it's all A's and B's. And, maybe he'd let a C slip by. You come to deer camp. Well, I mean, for me, being in school most of the time, at that age anyways, not to sound like I wasn't a good student. Well, I guess I wasn't really a good student that early on. But, getting such high grades for me was more of a challenge. I spent more time, scratching in a notebook, drawing pictures than I did listening to the teacher. My dad for 2 years when I was 12 and 13. So you used to have to be 12 years old to start, hunting in Wisconsin. And when I was 12 and when I was 13, I got the, sorry, your grades aren't good enough. You're going to have to wait until second weekend. It's a 9-day gun season here in Wisconsin. And, for me, that really bummed me out a lot because my uncles were there and my second cousins and, family. And I'd heard the stories and I guess I just wanted to be there. Well, now I'm older and I realize that the reason that I didn't get to go to deer camp was more or less because of what went on at deer camp. You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe not the best place for a 12 or 13-year-old to be, but I will say that, sorry for kind of jogging around there, but I guess to get back to the point, when my first year at 12 years old, my dad took me up there on second weekend and there was snow on the ground. We were in Waupaca County, which is just a little bit south of the very center of the state of Wisconsin. And we set up we had a back 40 there, some family owns, and we set up on a ridge, and then down below us is a fire lane, and then another ridge adjacent from where we were sitting. And in the first 20 minutes of shooting light, a string of does came through. I think there was 9 of them. And my dad told me to pick the biggest one, and he told me they were about 75 yards out, and I had my uncle's 20 gauge 1100 with a slug barrel on it and a scope, and that's the gun that I practiced with. And anyways, I ended up giving myself a good scope ring around the eye. That wasn't too fun, but it's something that I won't forget. So that's my recollection: shooting my first doe and getting scope ring.
Gotcha. So Sam, it's thick where you are now. I don't usually think of thick areas until I get into the south, down around North Carolina and south of that. So you have to deal with swamplands and thick overgrowth where you are.
Yeah, big time. Southeast Wisconsin, we're close to Lake Michigan. I think that plays a big hand in that. But it's a lot of cattail marshes. Some of the swampland, in particular, I lease 125 acres not more than maybe 5 miles as the crow flies from my house. And that property is abuts a river. It's not far from some public hunting ground, and it's comprised of. It used to be an old farm, back in the early 1900s. So it used to be all crop fields, but because it's lower land, it tends to flood. And once the farm sold off many years ago, and then kind of been passed around a little bit up until now. It hasn't really been farmed except by the front of it, which is, when I say front, meaning by the road, and that's higher ground there. There's about 32 tillable acres on it, but the rest of it that used to be tillable is now since become, tall grass, sweeping tall grass and cattails and just a bunch of tag alders and dogwood thickets. And I mean, it's great bedding for deer. But it makes it really challenging to hunt because those deer, instead of coming out into the wide open, they tend to, follow the cover of the dogwood and the tags. And to make a little more sense of that, back when it was farmed, they had ditches throughout the property, and the ditch ends up meeting up with the river on the backside. Well, those ditches were intended to, help drain when it would rain. They'd fill up and then they'd drain into the river and help keep the land a little bit drier for the sake of farming. Well,
sure.
Over time, dogwood and tags have grown along the edges of those ditches. So it's funny, you'd be looking across a big sweeping, sagegrass field, and then there's cattails, and then all of a sudden there's just this like skinny finger of dogwood and tag alders, and it's maybe like 20 yards wide at the most, but probably closer to like 10 to 15 in most areas. And those deer follow along that ditch, and it kind of weaves throughout the property, and it's got different fingers sticking off of it. And that's how they navigate to and from. So it can be a real challenge to get on top of one out there. But, that's part of the adventure of it, and that's why I do what I do. I guess if you ever lose the adventure feeling of the hunt, it might just get boring. At least that's the way it's always felt for me. So
right. No,
it's a challenging environment to be in, and I love it.
Yeah, I agree with that. It just, I don't think I can say the word hunt without thinking adventure. It just doesn't compute in my brain.
Yeah. I don't know if you can walk out of the woods and you don't have a story to tell, or at least a story to think back on, then, I don't know. I don't mean to say you weren't doing something right, but I mean, maybe you just weren't in the right area, or I don't know what was going on, but I think I could write a book about every single hunt I go on. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, and I surely appreciate it.
Right, exactly. I feel like I can, I want to share the story with everybody. Not everybody wants to listen to the story. And certainly there are different categories of adventure in each show or each story, but it's certainly a story, and it's certainly an adventure, to me anyway.
Yeah. I tend to talk my stories out with my wife, and she shows great attention in the beginning. And then after a while, I catch her on her phone or look in the other direction, and then I'm like, "Are you listening to me?" And then she catches back up, and she's like, right. "Oh, yeah, of course." And then eventually, I get it out of her. She's like, "You talk too much," and I can't help it. I'm a writer, so I tend to talk in great detail about things. So if you catch me doing that on this phone call here, just let me know and I'll stop.
No. See, you're exactly the kind of guests we like to have on this show, the ones that are the deep thinkers and the writers and like to put thoughts into stories and then express them. If you can express them as a writer verbally, then it's even better for this format. And then we do not discourage that. We encourage that. Let's talk about your dad a little bit more. You said that he's kind of set some restrictions there on whether or not you were going to hunt, and it was based off of your grades. Was your dad kind of a strict guy?
No, not at all. My parents were divorced early on. I think I was a year and a half, not even 2 years old when they separated. But I spent my weekends, with my dad. If not every weekend, every other. But we tried to do every weekend together we could. And every bit about the time we spent together was spent outdoors. And I mean, every second of it. The only time we weren't outside, hunting or fishing or, him checking his trap lines or that kind of thing was if we were, sleeping, through the night, or he also was a farrier, and, so he was a horseshoer, and he made his own horseshoes and all that on the site and whatever ranch he was at or farm he was at. And sometimes, when I was younger, before his back got real bad, we would stop at a farm, a horse farm, and he'd shoe a couple horses, and then, we'd make sure we got out into the woods or on the water and spend some time together. So I don't know that there was necessarily time for him to be strict. It was like we only had the weekend, and that's what it came down to. But with the grades, I guess it was a combination of he instilled the passion for hunting and outdoors into me so early on. He knew what it meant to me, and for him to be a parent from long distance, he lived out, probably an hour and a half away from where I lived with my mom during the week. And, for him to help guide me a little bit, it was like, well, if you love something, you have to earn your right to get to enjoy it. And that was a great life lesson. Now, again, him saying, you can only come to deer camp opening weekend if your grades are good. I'm pretty sure that it meant I don't know if you're ready to come hear the kind of talk that we talk at deer camp, and I don't know if I'm ready for you to see me have a cocktail yet, that kind of thing. I wasn't mature enough yet to maybe see that, but I can appreciate that now as I'm older.
Was there ever a situation where you missed deer camp because of grades, or is that just the excuse?
Yeah, it was those first 2 years when I was 12 and 13 where I had to miss that first weekend. And it was part of the deal. I knew it. It's just, like I say, I couldn't sit there in class and just think about whatever the teachers were talking about. All I thought about was what my dad and I are going to do the next weekend, or what we just did the weekend before. It's such a huge part of, it just captures my mind all the time. It's still like that now. It's just, I'm grown up now, and even in college, it took me a while to, get my thinking cap on and figure out that, hey, you got to get through this. It's going to cost you a whole bunch of money if you don't focus on your grades, and you got a whole life ahead of you you can spend outdoors. But right now you need to buckle down. But yeah, those first 2 years were the only two that my grades weren't good enough. After that, I learned my lesson. I'm never missing opening weekend again, because it kind of hurt my feelings at the time, if I'm honest.
Gotcha. Who taught you how to hunt?
It largely was my dad. My uncle's, his brothers, he's got two brothers, and they're, big into the outdoors as well, fishing and hunting. And then my grandpa, he's big into, my dad's dad, big into hunting. On my mom's side, my uncles and my grandpa on my mom's side, they hunted, but they weren't what you'd call, it wasn't casual for them. My dad's side, my mom's side, it was casual. It kind of, the best way to relate it to is like, the guy that loves deer hunting and he respects it, but he only gets out during the gun season. The archery season, what is that? And when is that? I don't even know, because all I know is the 9-day gun season. That's kind of how my mom's side was. On my dad's side, it was much more involved. It wasn't just deer hunting. It was every spring, you're turkey hunting. My dad was running trap lines since he was a teenager, and he doesn't do that anymore. He hasn't done that for a lot of years. But if it wasn't turkey hunting, then it was duck and goose hunting, and, just the whole works. And I was involved with all of it from an early age. And, the best memories I have, to be honest with you, growing up hunting, is my dad taught me how to squirrel hunt. That's really where it kicked off for me. We went out in the woods together. We explored. I learned a lot about the woods, and how to navigate the woods. It sounds simple, but and I know, with your, some of your style of deer hunting and tracking, how much you can learn just walking around. And
right.
And our experiences when I was young really circulated around, going to different public lands, and I'd carry a pellet gun, that you had to pump 10 times to shoot a pellet very slow. And I never really got anything with that thing, but he would carry his 410 and I'd carry my pellet gun, and I felt like a big man or something. And, I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And it just made me feel good about myself and felt like I was one of the guys. You know, as soon as I was big enough to be one of the guys, I made dang sure that I was, you know?
Right, right. When did you feel like you were able to kind of break away from your dad's wing, so to speak, and
you know what?
go on your own?
That's a really good question. That was a major part of my life. My dad, I was his buddy. You know, I was always there with him every weekend. And when I was 15 years old, we started having those conversations that they were uncomfortable for me, and I didn't understand why we had to have them at the time. My dad would talk about, you're going to be 16 soon, in less than a year. And when you're 16, you're going to get your driver's license. And you got your driver's license, and you're in high school, and your buddies, you're probably going to want to go off on your own and do your own hunting trips. And just want to make sure that you don't forget about your old man, and that I'd like to still hunt with you sometimes. My dad's a real gentle man. I mean, He's a man's man, but he's a gentle man when it comes to, his son. And at the time I was thinking to myself, like, this is such a weird conversation. I'm 15, I'm cool. I'm not going to stop hunting with you, Dad. Of course not. But, that is what happened. I mean, I could turn 16. I met kids in school that shared the same, passions as I, and, we would drive all over the state, to be perfectly honest with you, doing different types of hunting. I mean, we used to leave at odd hours to drive 3 hours to get to a area for rabbit hunting or squirrel hunting even. Nowadays, you'd have to twist my arm to get me to drive 3 hours to go squirrel hunting on a oak ridge that's just notorious for big fox squirrels or something. But back then, man, we lived for that. And so I guess that was kind of a weird thing, because my dad probably felt it a lot more than I did. For me, I was still doing what I love, and I was doing it with my friends, I was having fun, and I wasn't looking back.
Right. And
I think if I'm honest, I think my dad probably was on the sideline feeling like I'm on the sideline riding the bench or something. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, definitely. Tell me about your friends, like the friends that you transitioned away from your dad a little bit. What were they like?
Yeah.
How did they influence your life?
Well, they're very much like me. I mean, they don't necessarily have the passion for the writing so much as I do, but they're very they're well-spoken individuals, but they don't. I guess here's the best way to phrase up the majority of my friends, especially the ones that are in the world of hunting. They don't talk a lot. It's not that they don't have anything to say. It's just loose lips sink ships, and these are the kinds of guys that, like, they're very humble, and they're great at what they do. I mean, I've got buddies of mine that, been hunting for as long as I do, or as long as I have. I'm 33 years old right now, and, they're all the same age. And some of them have, 15 big bucks on the wall, all Pope and Youngers, and that's a lot of deer to have on your wall at such an early age. And then a handful of other racks that, maybe Euro mounts that, they're dedicated and they're successful hunters. And I think it says a lot about, their ability to get on deer, especially when you think about, like, in Wisconsin, there's a lot of back 40s and some, 80s and, 120 acre parcels. These are really small pieces. You can burn a piece out like that in no time. And to be frank, I mean, most of these guys are hunting on 5, 10, 20 acre pieces, and they're shooting big deer on them. So they're skilled hunters, and growing up with them, which I did, was just, I think that really evolved me into who I am today as far as a hunter. I mean, the adventure side of it, especially. I mean, no, don't get me wrong. I don't know a lot of people that can relate to some of the adventures my dad took me on when I was young. I mean, we used to put on homemade marsh skis my dad made. I don't know if you know what a marsh ski is, but they're like 6 to 7 feet long. And you can literally, they float, and so you can walk out into the cattails or the reeds or like a rice pad out in the marsh and throw your decoys out. And maybe what we would do is we'd go to public land, and my dad had a set of wheels that he put under his canoe, and we'd take that down a fire lane as far as we could go, and then he'd portage it on his shoulders a long ways, and then we'd drag it into the marsh to get back to some potholes that otherwise unreachable, and nobody else pressured. So to me, those are extreme adventures. And I've met a lot of guys in the industry and a lot of guys that are just, guys at work or just random Joes that love hunting and talking about it. And I haven't met a whole lot of guys that are like my dad or like my friends, who get down and dirty with it and go into sick, nasty stuff that the rest of the world, tries to avoid.
Right.
Those are the places that we seek out. So if that kind of answers your question.
So how do you seek out these thick places, and what do you do once you get there? I mean, getting in and out of thick areas is not easy. How do you go about deciding whether it's a good play or not?
You know what? It was a lot harder when I was younger, because when I was younger, you didn't have the internet to go and look at these amazing aerial maps, and you didn't have Google Earth. You didn't have that ability to scout online is huge today, where it wasn't, back then. Back then, the only way to find out about those places was to, lace up your boots and go get your face cut up with branches and explore, wear yourself out a little bit and learn. And I learned a lot about those spots and those types of areas from my dad. My dad trained my eyes, I think I'd say, in the sense that, I could be 200 yards away from a wood line driving on the freeway, and I can immediately recognize a horizontal back of a deer standing just inside of the woods off that field edge. Whereas, a lot of people driving by don't see that kind of thing. And similarly, when it comes to like terrain, he taught me how to like recognize dips in the terrain where there's likely water. Look at that tree line. Well, can you see anything beyond it? It's not like it's a big hill. So likely it dips down. There's probably water. There's probably a little pond back there or marsh. And so back then, that's how I kind of recognized. It was either, getting the boots wet, and hiking back in the thick of it to find out for myself, and then just making mental notes or writing them down in my journal, or today, I do a lot of my scouting online, and topographs and online scouting has really made, cut the learning curve for a lot of people that are into that kind of, hunting the thick stuff like I like to do.
Gotcha.
We really focus on transition edges a lot. When it's like, and I don't mean to cut you off, but
no,
I just finished the last point is like, I'm looking at a marsh and I'm looking at transition edges. You can see the cattails, they're different colors. And those are the immediate places that I'm thinking about going in and getting in close to and walking, because I want to know, the deer bedding there, deer naturally travel
transition edges.
So it's easy to key in on areas, I guess.
Describe these transition areas a little more in detail, just so everybody has a good understanding of what you mean.
Yeah, so there's a number of different ways of looking at it. A transition edge could be, from an egg field, you got crops and hardwoods, or, in the marshes, you've got cattails, and then, you've got a line of dogwood and tag alder thicket that abuts it. And sometimes you have elevation changes, and that's a transition change. I mean, if you think about rising and dropping thermals, when it comes to scent, especially the guys that hunt in the bigger hills, they have to consider that a lot more than, some of us flatlanders do. But, sometimes like in where I hunt, it's really flat farmland with swamps.
Okay.
And being able to find a transition to maybe even a 2 or 3 foot elevation change could be all the difference in the world, because the deer might prefer to either travel on that higher ground to stay dry, or to, have a better visual over the land that they're walking through, or even for the sake of scent, So in a nutshell, that's kind of what the transitions we're looking at are.
And so you're looking at these transition areas on a map, and you're trying, and then you go and scout it. And then from there, you decide whether or not that's a good setup ambush point or not.
Yeah, so I used to be the kind of guy that, and then let me just paraphrase here. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with pre-hung sets. I mean, I've got 2 different private pieces that I hunt quite a bit, and I have stands on both of them that have been there for a few years. I mean, I got to brush them out once in a while and make sure that the tree doesn't grow around them. I don't want to kill a tree, but I've really, in the last 6 years, become more of a mobile hunter. And I guess 5 years ago, this would be my 6th season really being a mobile hunter in the sense that, and I don't mean on the ground. I've hunted on the ground my whole life that I've been hunting. I've been a ground hunter, but I mean packing a stand in, hanging a set when you find fresh sign, sitting it, and then packing that stand right back out of there and hitting a different spot or a different tree the next night or the next morning. Sometimes, sit the same stand. I'll leave it out there and I'll come back in on private land and I'll come back and sit it again the next day or 2 days later. But after that, I feel like it's pretty much burned out and it's time to move on and find a new spot. You keep the deer guessing. So to answer your question more directly, and this same thing with Whitetail Adrenaline too. When we're on the ground, you're walking into an area that you might have scouted, or you're just exploring for the first time. No matter what, you're looking for fresh sign. Jared Scheffler, he's really he pays a lot of attention to this kind of detail. One of the things he always says is, what's hot today might be cold tomorrow. So you might walk into a piece and it might be hot with fresh sign, but you walk out of there and come back and check on it the next day and it's just gone cold. And why is that? I don't know. Is it because you just visited it and deer only get big because they're smart and they get older because they're smart enough to avoid you, and they probably came through in the dark after you left and thought, I better not come back around there again. I'm not sure what the reason that spots go hot and cold are, but I do know that the beauty of packing a stand in, if you're going to sit in a tree or if you're hunting from the ground, is being able to set up on fresh sign. And, if you walk into a piece and you see that it's not hot right now, then you just keep moving and you find somewhere else to sit. Yeah.
And what are you looking for to decide whether a place is hot or cold?
Well, it's conditional. It depends on the time of year. Right now, we're kind of getting a little past mid-October, and soon the pre-rut's going to start. And, I'm going to be leaving on Monday to go hook up with Jared again and film with Whitetail Adrenaline in Minnesota. And that's going to be the same kind of time frame as I was there last year. And so let's use that as a starting point. When I went in with Jared, we were focused on, okay, is there scrapes? Is there fresh rubs in the area? And really, tracks always make a difference, right? But I think it really came down to scrapes and rubs. And I'll be honest, we walked a lot of ground, but we did not see a lot of scrapes and a lot of rubs. And that was kind of interesting because I don't think we thought about it. We never game planned when we walked in. It was sort of like, let's walk in and then see if we recognize what at the time seems like fresh sign. But we didn't have that conversation until like 2 days into it. And we talked about how, boy, it's kind of funny that we're not seeing much for rubs or scrapes. And you'd think that, with it being right around that time for pre-rut, those bucks would be on their feet moving around, scent checking for does and just trying to see if there's any girls that are hot. And usually they do that by going and freshening scrapes and going and, that's how they communicate with those scrapes. And I'm not saying that we hunt over scrapes or anything. I don't hunt over scrapes. I used to do that when I was younger, and I'd see deer, but they'd be like 60, 70 yards downwind of the scrape because they're not always just coming to the scrape. They're going downwind to see if it's been freshened by any other deer.
Right.
But I guess, here I go again on a rant, but, it is conditional. I'm going to be looking for, though, next week, I'm going to be looking for scrapes and I'm going to be looking for rubs. If we get a rain the night before and I go in and I see a scrape has been freshened and there's a bunch of them in the area, then I know that there's some active deer in the area that are working. And so I don't want to get too far away from there. I know I'm in their house. I don't know where their bedroom is, and I don't know where I don't know everything about it yet. I just know that I'm in their house, and that's close enough for me to feel confident.
All right. And how do you decide where to set up from there? Like, you stepped in the front door.
Yeah.
Which couch you going to sit on? How do you decide?
Yeah. Well, so again, it's so conditional. It's easier to answer that and I'm not straying from the question. I'll answer it as best I can, but
it's a difficult question. I'm sure each setup is different, and you probably read in different terrain and signs.
Right. I don't know. So if you're hunting food, when I'm hunting a food source, a lot of times I'm looking, if I can tell that they've been, working a bean field or something, or working some freshly chopped corn, it's really challenging to walk into a new piece you've never been into before and have any idea where they're entering that field, because it's wide open, and most of the time they're probably feeding in that last 10, 15 minutes of daylight before they break cover and into the darkness. I tend to avoid a lot of food sources after the first 2 weeks of the season. And I guess if I go back a step, when I do concentrate on food sources, I'm usually setting up an observation stand in a spot where I'm like, well, I could see a deer close by here and I might shoot one, but more likely than not, I'm going to be observing and seeing where I witness them coming out, and then I'll slide down, like I did that last year, and I killed a piebald buck in like the 4th day of the season or 3rd day of the season by doing just this. And, you slide down to where they're coming out and hope they do it the next day. But this time of year, it's, if I walk into a piece like we did last year in Minnesota, and we saw, it was raining the night before and it was raining on and off all day, and all of a sudden we're in this bottom area between several ridges that kind of converge like a central hub, and there was like, I think 9 scrapes in a area the size of a little bigger than a larger kitchen, and they were all fresh. I mean, they're all scraped, and I'm like, boy, it just rained 2 hours ago, so there's got to be hot deer in the area.
Right.
So we tucked in against a couple trees and just observed for a while, and then we had that 2-year-old 8 or 9 come through, and then that real gnarly 14-pointer that came in that I ended up missing. I shot at him when he was rubbing on a tree, and then after that miss, we hiked up the hill, the ridge. It's not like a hill, don't get me wrong. That's some steep terrain. We got up top because we had been glassing from the bottom of the ridges, looking up the ridges for deer bedded down or moving. We thought, well, with the dropping thermals, why don't we get up? There's a shelf on this particular ridge, and let's just get just above or on that shelf and walk it. And so we were doing that, and then we ended up seeing the buck that I ended up killing just below us, about 50 yards below us, and he was definitely scent checking for does, and the wind happened to be in our favor, thank God. But what was so peculiar is that he was, and you don't get this necessarily from watching it on Defiance, but he was just about 100 yards up the ridge, uphill from exactly where I had just missed that 14 and then seen that other 2.5-year-old deer walk through. So all 3 of those deer, if you look at it from the sky, you could draw a tiny little circle around where 3 bucks were. So there's fresh sign. We set up on it, and we had activity.
Gotcha. All right, so you were in the vicinity. You knew you were in the vicinity, and then you just kind of had to ease your way around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're being strategic about it. You're thinking about everything. You're thinking about which way is the wind blowing, how are the thermals going to affect me right now, and you're looking ahead. My dad taught me at a young age. You always look about 3 steps ahead of you, and then you can look up and look around for deer. That way, those next 3 steps, you kind of have an idea where to put your foot down, so you don't step on an obvious branch or something and make a bunch of noise.
Right.
Well, that same concept applies here. It's like when you're navigating terrain from the ground, you're kind of looking ahead and you're like, okay, well, I can see where, there's a finger on this ridge and that's a good spot for a deer to bed down. Or you're looking out across the field and you see 2 points, 2 fingers of hardwoods, kind of jutting out into the crop field. Well, that's likely a spot where deer are going to funnel back and forth across that crop field because they're out in the open for minimal time. That's a spot that I would think, boy, we should maybe sneak in there and get close. There's a lot of strategy involved and a lot of thinking that goes into it.
Gotcha. How did you connect with Jared Scheffler in the beginning?
Sure. So I wrote an article. It was about getting aggressive and keeping deer thinking, that guessing game. He ended up reading that article, and I mentioned the likes of Dan Infalt, in his beast methods of getting up close to deer beds. And I mentioned, Jared Scheffler and Whitetail Adrenaline crew and how they can get up to, incredibly short distances to big, mature whitetails in open prairie ground, on the ground, on public land. And really and that was just a short piece of the article. The main part of the article was about, one day I realized I kind of married my tree stand, and I was seeing young deer and does, but never mature bucks. And I decided to get off my butt and move away from that stand that I felt like I was kind of, joined at the hip with.
Yeah.
And I snuck into a deadfall on the side of a field and ended up killing one that was like 5 yards away from me. So he read that, and he contacted me. He sent me a message. I don't remember how he did it. If he did it on like Facebook or something like that, or I don't know. Or I was managing a website at the time. I think he actually might have contacted me that way. But he said, "Hey, what's your mailing address? And thanks, by the way, for the nice mention in that article. Do you mind if I share it?" I said, "Of course, please do share it. I love to have more readers." And here's my address. And I ended up getting home a couple of days later, and there's a nice Whitetail Adrenaline hat. And, those postcards that Jared puts in the DVDs that kind of personalizes the shipment to say, "Hey, thanks for your support."
Yep.
Well, that was in there, but it was a elongated message, and it was, saying how much he could relate to that. And that's kind of how he felt like he developed into his ground habits on the ground, hunting.
Yep.
And that relatability. And he gave me his phone number, and he said, "I want you to call me." So I called him, and we just shot the bull for a while, like you and I have done.
Right.
And next thing you know, I'm thinking to myself, boy, I would love to do another big article. I'm gonna write about Whitetail Adrenaline. So I called Jared up, and I said, "Hey, you interested in collaborating and maybe get Shay on board too?" And he goes, "Absolutely. What do you got in mind?" And so we ended up writing an article together called Strictly Public, Strictly from the Ground. And it is a comprehensive article. It's very long, but if you knew how long it was before we cut all the words out that were in it before,
right.
It would blow your mind,
Right.
But here, if you're interested in knowing the details behind, the sleepless nights driving from state to state over, state lines, and what it takes to do what the crew does with Whitetail Adrenaline, and why pick certain pieces of public, and how to access them, different ideas on ways to get into the back door of a piece of public where most guys tend to avoid. You got to remember, and this is nothing new to you, but anybody, listening, it's if you really want to know the trick to hunting public land, it's go where everybody isn't going, because that's where the deer are,
Right.
You park in a main parking lot, and you can look on aerial maps and you can see trails that look like deer trails from the sky stemming away from the parking lot. And a lot of guys, see that or stumble across it out in the woods and think it's a deer trail and then follow it, and they end up getting to some guy's, tree that he's been sitting the last 20 years or something.
Right.
Gotcha. So anyways.
Gotcha. Fascinating. So you kind of have become a ground hunter over the years, and it sounds like I like your concept of not or realizing that you're married to your tree stand. I think that's one of those things that you get kind of attached to, and I think you're right. Sometimes you have to break out of your own mold to become more successful. And I assume that there are certain things that you bring with you into the woods that you pack, your gear. And we'd like to kind of pick that apart a little bit just to see what you travel with as you hone your ground game. And I'd like to turn the mic over to Dusty here and just have him go through all those things that you feel are necessary when you're pursuing whitetail or any deer on the ground.
All right, let's do it.
Do you carry a backpack with you?
You know what? I'm, I think that's a funny question. And the only reason I say it's funny is because I'm not the one that carries a backpack. A lot of guys do. I carry a fanny pack around my waist, like early 90s, late 80s style.
Good. Is there any particular brand of fanny pack you carry?
You know what? I think it's the cheapest one I could find at, Farm and Fleet or some, I don't even know where I got it, but I know it only cost me $10 or $12, and it's camouflage and it's got a waterproof liner, and that's all that mattered to me. I can't wear a backpack. I mean, I can. I choose not to wear a backpack because while you can fit a lot more stuff in it, if I've got a tree stand on my back, that makes it complicated. And of course, you can affix your backpack to the outside of your sticks and your stand. But hey, if I'm hunting on the ground, I need to make sure that I can sneak, through a deadfall. And if I got to bend over and sneak through some low stuff, and that branches are grabbing my backpack, then that makes it complicated. So I'm a minimal guy. Yeah.
Right. Let's take and open the zipper on the fanny pack and tell us what's inside.
Yeah. I've got a Ziploc in there with toilet paper. There's a number of things you can do with toilet paper. It's not all what you think it might be. But I've used it for trailing deer, leaving little pieces here and there because it's white. It shows up really well in the daylight and in the dark with your flashlight or without a flashlight on the moonlight. But also for the bathroom purposes too, and anything else. I've also got my knife in there. I can't go to the woods without a knife. And I've always got a flashlight, a little mini light. I've gutted a lot of deer in my life, and I would say probably 40% of them, because I know it's been more than half that I haven't, but about 40% I'd say I've gutted barehanded. And I don't have an issue with getting my hands dirty or getting blood under my fingernails. What I have an issue with is smelling my hands while I'm driving home. So I like to keep a pair of gutting gloves in there with me. And then I always have an extra Ziploc to put inner tenderloins in. So right when I, field dress a deer, I cut out the inner tenderloins so they don't dry out, and I put them in that Ziploc. That way they get taken care of right away, and I either eat them that night or the next day.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Any particular camouflage that you're wearing while you're hunting?
Camouflage is something that I used to be, on the type that thought that it made a difference. And I am kind of weary about what I pick to wear. The UV stuff, that kind of bugs me. I've seen some of the science behind it, and I see how you can look like a blob. But, when you think about the shades of gray that deer see, when you're starting to think about your pattern, does it really make a difference if you're not moving or if you're blending in with your background? The only thing I don't like to wear is blue. But you know what? This goes back to a conversation I cashed out with Dan Infold, because he always hunts with whatever he's got. I mean, it doesn't have to be camouflage. He goes in with blue jeans on and a flannel. And I remember one time having a back and forth spat with him about, what is this? You go in there and you just dress however you want and think you can kill a deer, and he kind of looks at you and says, "Yep," and he's got a whole barn wall to prove it too, So it kind of makes you think: does camouflage really matter? And I'm not knocking anybody for wearing camouflage because I wear it too. I mean, I always wear it. But I like if you were to ask me what pattern I'd wear today, I like to wear stuff that's lighter colored, like a tan, or I kind of like that sky camo too, that vertigo.
Right.
With dark branches. So it's that old Predator camo. I like that, and I really like the Kuiu stuff too. That stuff's awesome.
That makes
sense.
Just
so it breaks up your silhouette. Yeah.
What kind of boots are you wearing these days?
Oh my gosh, I wear I wear a lot of different types of boots per the circumstances, situational again. But if it's like me wading in a river or a marsh with chest waders on, I always have a pair of boots over my shoulders so I can change into something a little more comfortable once I get to where I'm going. And those boots could be, old pair of steel toes. They could be, a pair of, old hunting boots that I might have picked up from, a Cabela's or a Bass Pro or something. Nothing real name brand or fancy, just whatever keeps my feet dry for the most part. And even those don't always work for some of the stuff that I walk in. But, I learned a valuable lesson. I'll tell you what, when you're hunting on the ground, the last thing you want to ever think about wearing is steel toes. I mean, that was a bad idea to begin with because it was cold last year when I was wearing those in late October, and steel toe and cold weather don't go together very well, but I just threw them in my pack and put them on because I didn't care what happened to them. Well, I did care about the fact that I got kind of chicken legs, and, at the end of hiking all day long, my legs were cashed out. It was just bad. And they're because they're so heavy. So what I learned was if you're hunting in a tree stand, wear a heavier boot. And if you're going to be on your feet, wear something real light, and don't worry about being cold because you're going to warm up fast. I mean, you get yourself a pair of you go to Merrill or Solomon website and you look at some of the boots that they offer for trail hiking or for trail running. And these are people that are running and they're over your ankles, so they support you. and they're real lightweight. They're not exactly that warm, but they're not that mesh material either. They got leather over them, so they, for the most part, keep you dry. Your feet are going to be cold for the first 30 minutes or hour, but after that, you warm up in a hurry, and you stay warm the rest of the day.
Gotcha. It makes sense. So you're not real particular on what kind of boots that you put on, just as long as they do the job that you're needing them to do at the particular place you're at.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of guys like to wear the knee highs, the galoshes, or the rubber boots. And I've got a pair of those too, and I got a couple pairs of those, and I'm just not entirely comfortable with them. I mean, there's some that are more comfortable than others. Kind of, you get what you pay for. But I'm not, because I don't really tend to, walk in to a piece the same spot every time. I don't take the same path every time I walk in, and I don't hunt the same trees very often. And so I'm not so worried about leaving a scent trail behind, because I try to make sure that, on private land, especially where you really have to be careful about your entrance and exits. I try to be careful about that. So it doesn't affect me in the future. I mean, I know that, a lot of guys wear those rubber boots because they don't want to leave a scent trail behind. Well, I believe that you still leave some scent behind with those rubber boots, but that's not the point. It's just that if I'm not entirely comfortable in them and I'm trying to be strategic about my entrance and exit, I don't care if I'm leaving scent behind me. So I just want to be comfortable.
Awesome. So we got into your fanny pack. We got in a little bit into your attire, what you wear, and we talked about your boots. Let's get into your bow. What kind of bow are you shooting when you're going to the woods?
I've got a Halon. It's a Matthews bow. It's my first expensive bow, I guess you'd say. I started out shooting instinctive with a recurve when I was really young, and then my dad gave me a hand-me-down bear archery compound that his brother had handed down to him, and then he handed to me. And so I think I was like 16 years old using this bow that was from like the 80s or something, and it was the 90s, and bows had come a long way since then, so it wasn't anything fancy. And the thing was so tall, it was about the same height as not really, but it was so tall you almost saw it like you were shooting a recurve or a longbow or something, but it was a compound. And then a good friend of mine that, going back to the question about, starting to hunt after I got my driver's license with some of my buddies, one of my buddies handed down an old bow that he had for 6 or 7 years up to that point. And I used that old bow. I don't remember, it was a PSE, I think it was, or what it was, or a Pearson. I think it was a PSE. It doesn't matter. But the thing was really tall, again, like old compound style, but man, was it hard to pull back, and boy, did it shoot fast. And I killed more deer with that old bow than I think that some people could say that they've killed with a fancy, expensive bow. It doesn't matter as long as it shoots straight and it shoots fast. And then the limb ended up splitting on me, not in a dangerous kind of way, but it cracked. And so I had to retire that one, and ended up paying like $300 for a mission from a friend of mine who is, upgrading. And I used that bow for 4 years, or I think 4 seasons. And last season was my last season with it, the 2015 archery season. That's the bow you see me using in Whitetail Adrenaline on Defiance. It's just a little bow. I mean, it's super lightweight, and it didn't shoot very fast. Sorry to say. I mean, I bet you I don't know how many deer I killed with it, maybe 20. I shot through probably half of them, and the other half I think the arrow stuck out of. So I pleaded with my wife, can I buy a man bow? And and it was between my new quote unquote my new man bow, something that was expensive and super fast and highly accurate, or a longbow. And I made the decision to go with the compound because I think I'll get more use out of it. And to be honest, I just am not ready to make the jump yet to do like what Jared does and get out there with a longbow. I would do it situationally, again, like give me a longbow for this hunt and I'd be happy to carry it, but I don't know if I could do it all season long. Right.
Yeah. Between the fanny pack and the man bow, you're kind of a likable guy.
I appreciate that.
What do you prefer if you're going, let's say you're going out on a private farm, private land, you prefer a hang-on, a climber, a ladder stand, or a ground blind? What's your preference?
Okay, I absolutely pick a carry-in hang-on. I mean, I'm almost strictly a hang and hunt kind of guy. Now, the last time I went in with my hang-on, my carry-in stand, it's a lone wolf assault. I go in there with that, and I only have one because I typically take it down and take it out with me, and I can take it anywhere. But I left it in this tree out on a private 125-acre piece I was hunting because I texted my wife. My phone had been videotaping in my pocket for like an hour, so my battery was down to like nothing. And I texted my wife. I said, you want me to, do you want to call in a carry-out pizza or something for dinner tonight? And then just let me know and I'll pick it up on my way home. And I no sooner did I send that message than did, and see that it was sent, than did my phone die. So now I'm thinking, okay, I got this little girl at home and my wife is probably, she probably just got home from work and she's, baby wrangling and she's probably super hungry and hasn't had a chance to snack yet. And here I am out here hunting and, what if she said yes? And she, and I don't know. And I've got to carry my stand. I got to tear it down. I got to pack it out and I got to drive home, ask her if she called in a pizza and then hope I can get there in time to get it before it goes cold. Well, lo and behold, she didn't actually want to get a pizza. She was on a health kick. She's usually on a health kick, but she definitely wasn't interested in a pizza that day. But the point is I had to leave my stand in the tree so I could save that, 15 extra minutes that it might have taken me to pack it in and pack it out in the dark, just so I could get home in time to have that extra 15 minutes to go get that pizza if she did want it. So the rest of the story, I'm going on. I'm sorry about that. But so then the next day. So the next day, I'm like, well, I'm going to go hunt, and I got a south wind. This is a few days ago. This is on the 14th, or 13th or 14th. It was a Friday after work, and she gave me the green light. My wife did say, hey, if you want to go hunting, hop in a tree tonight. And I'm thinking, great, shoot, I don't have my stand and sticks. Well, now I'm limited. I've got a south wind. That's a really hard wind to hunt. I mean, for most places, at least around me, at least the pieces that I hunt. And so I'm not going to go into public unless I'm on my feet. And I have one farm that, is great for a south wind. And there's a couple pre-hung sets. So there's one that would work out just right for the wind. And I had no idea what I'd see. Well, I ended up climbing up in that tree and I killed a buck, a pretty good sized wide 8-pointer just a few days ago out of that stand. But yeah, when you think about private land or especially private land, when you think about what tree stand you're going to take out with you, you really, or if you're going to sit in a ground blind or whatever, you really got to think about how fast you can truly burn out private land. A lot of guys, when they get private land, they avoid public 100% because why would I go compete with other people when I've got this piece to myself? That's kind of the mentality around it. And I'm guilty of it too. Don't get me wrong. But you've got to be careful about the wind, your entrance, your exit. And I think the best way that at least the way that I found success in the last, 5-6 years is the fact that I'm always keeping the deer guessing by sitting a different tree, picking different spots, and they never really know how to maneuver through that property because I could be anywhere at any time. I mean, they know I'm out there. Don't get me wrong. Eventually, they're going to cut my track, and they're going to know that a person was in there, or whatever. But if you're hunting a different tree because, you're carrying a stand in and out of there, you're keeping them guessing. You're getting the edge on them. So I guess that's my answer.
Yeah, good deal. Great answer.
Very good answer.
Jay, you want to get into going on a whitetail hunt?
Yeah, let's turn over to the whitetail hunt. Before we got started, Sam, I asked you to think of your most memorable deer hunt. You've been on a ton. You've killed a lot of deer over the years, and I don't know which one's going to stick out the most to you, but I'm curious. Where are we going?
The most memorable deer hunt?
Yep.
The most memorable deer hunt that sticks out to me is absolutely the canoe buck from last season in Minnesota on public land.
Okay.
with Jared filming with Whitetail Adrenaline.
All right, let's slow this whole process down a little bit and go detail by detail and really help us understand what happened that day.
Yeah. Well, that night before, we had been walking for 3 days straight, and I think we only bumped one deer. That was a shootable deer. It was like 145, 150-inch buck. out of this big bottom area. And he was bedded. Jared and I stopped to kind of figure out our next move, and we're sitting there talking, and a couple of does jump up, and this buck jumps up. That was it. I mean, that's all we'd seen in 3 days. Other than we moved some does around and a couple of little, real young, like yearling bucks, but that was it. And so, your confidence starts wearing a little bit, and you never know what to expect the next day when you haven't seen much the days leading up to it. We were spending a lot of time on the phone. Jared's talking to some family and friends in the area, seeing what the latest and greatest is from them. I'm checking with guys back home. What's the movement been like? It's been real slow for us. Is it picking up by you? And all of a sudden, one day we got out of the piece of woods and we're moving on to the next one. We had about an hour and a half to drive, and Jared got on the phone with somebody, and he's saying, I just got off the phone with my other buddy who's only hunting, probably 30 miles away from you guys, and he's passed on like 4 Pope and Youngers. This guy, I guess, doesn't shoot anything under like a 160 or something. So that's not me, but that's where his level's at. And so he's passing these big, 130s, 140s, 150s up, waiting for a big one. And he's like, deer just moving right now. So of course, Jared and I are getting all antsy in our pants. You just got to get to the next piece. We need to get our boots on the ground. And we walk into this next piece and we find all kinds of sign. In fact, if you remember from Defiance, where I find a leaf that's got some, I call it buck juice on it. And I'm rubbing it on my socks and on my legs. I'm more or less just being goofy, but at the same time trying to put it to good use. But we knew there was a buck in the area. I mean, it just smelled like deer in there. And it was right on this river. And in looking at the aerials and in the parcel maps, the plot book is like, boy, there's 4 different pieces of public on this stretch of river over like the next 5 miles of river. What about coming back here in the morning and we put a canoe in? We could use Al's boat. Al's got Al Lapine from Whitetail Adrenaline. He's a roommate. He's never really home. He's usually on the road working, but he's a roommate of Jared's. And so, of course, stuff's there. And he's got this canoe in the tree line along the edge of the yard. And he's like, what if we put that boat in and we just go down the river and we hop piece to piece and we just say, forget about driving? And I'm all for that kind of adventure, man. That is perfect.
Right.
So we do that. That night as we're driving home, it starts pouring, and it doesn't stop pouring all night. I mean, even loading that canoe on, I mean, we got soaked to the bone. We were only outside tying that thing up for like 5 minutes. And the next morning, it was cold. It was probably in the low 40s, and it was on and off, raining. Not raining, I guess it was more misting and light rains here and there. So we get out, slide down to that first piece where, we had walked in the night before, and we settle into this bottom that we found a spot where it was evident that some bucks had fought. It was all matted down, and you could see these giant, hoof prints in the ground where they were pushing off of, and it was really neat and kind of, you see it happen, with your eyes closed. You just picture it all going down. So we kind of got in there right at first light, and we settled in and waited for about 40 minutes, and nothing happened. And, as an active, like, ground hunter, you don't sit and wait too long. 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there. 40 minutes is the max. I mean, unless you're really, really confident that, you should sit it out a little bit. We want to move on and make sure that we're keeping ourselves in the game. So we got in the boat. We go across to the next piece. It was just hardly downriver and basically across the river. And walk in there, and wasn't, 10 minutes. We weren't 10 minutes in, and I stopped and I said, this is dead. Let's boot. So we got the heck out of there, moved on to another piece that only way you could access it was from the river. And there's a tributary, or not a tributary, there's probably a spring up in those hills, and it makes a creek bed, made a creek bed down to the river we were on. And the only way you can get back to that public is if there's water flowing in that creek bed. And there was hardly a trickle, and there was probably 10 or more no trespassing warning signs on this little mouth of this creek. And I mean, if you laid flat, you could put your feet on one bank and your head on the other. And so when I say there's like that many signs, I mean, in that little space, it looks like the wall of your bedroom or something. There's all those signs warding people off.
Huh.
You know, you get that a lot when you hunt public land. You find no trespassing signs on public property, you know, 100 yards in, and sometimes you'll find the public line signs have been removed and then moved in further, and people like to grow their private a little bigger than it actually is. That kind of thing happens a lot.
Gotcha.
So this was silly, because if there was water in there, we know better. We had to walk right in there. But of course, just to be safe, we called a warden and double checked with them, because, you know, especially when you're filming and stuff, you know, the last thing you need is to deal with somebody, you know, raising questions and questioning your game plan.
Right.
So, you know, you cover all your tracks. So then, because it couldn't get back in there, we moved on to another one. Well, as we started getting further down that river, and I should say up that river, the rapids got bigger and it got shallower. Of course, the two go hand in hand, right? So no longer can we dig a paddle into the water and you know, push ourselves along. Now it's time to get out of the boat and walk that canoe up those rapids. And those rapids lasted for over a mile. It took a lot of wind out of us both. It wasn't easy. And, you know, you're slipping on rocks and you're tripping and you're falling and you're just trying to keep the camera dry and you know, be as quiet as you can. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't exhausted by the time we got to shore in front of that piece that we ended up killing that buck on.
Gotcha.
And so here we are. We're sweating. We're tired, and we're hot as can be. We know that we're going to cool down soon. So let's get something warm in our bellies. And wouldn't you know it, you know, Jared busts out his jet boil and he makes us a bowl of chicken noodle soup and we eat a couple sandwiches and, you know, recharge a little bit. And then
that's great.
Yeah, and at that point we're still sweating, you know, we're hot. But soon after we set up over that, you know, at that embankment there was a wall of a ridge, and I mean, to the point you're reaching forward and you're grabbing roots to pull yourself up, kind of a steepness.
Yeah.
We got up over that ridge, and now we're sweating even worse, and it starts raining on us. And I just knew we were in for it, because we had at least 3 hours of daylight left, and somehow we need to stay strong and comfortable as we could be anyways for that duration of the hunt. And I just knew with that rain and the sweat that was on our backs that as soon as we started to cool down a little bit, it was really going to cool down. We stumbled on that piece I was telling you about earlier that had all those scrapes, and we set up shop there, and I sat up against a tree. I cleared out all kinds of leaves and brush, so it was just soil under me, so it was quiet. And then I made sure that I brushed out, and when I say brushed out, I don't mean branches. I mean I kicked leaves and branches away from the ground for 5 feet to my left and 5 feet to my right. Okay. And the whole intent there was, if I need to stand up and there's a deer and I need to sneak, you know, parallel with that deer, I can walk quietly with my bow drawn.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Sure.
So I actually ended up having to do just that when that 14-pointer came through. I looked at Jared, you know, that smaller 8 or 9 or whatever he was came through, and we gave each other a thumbs up, like, well, we picked a spot where there's some deer. That's good sign. Nice to be close to him. And then I looked at him about 15 minutes later, and he gave me this look, and he started doing, like, I'm rolling with his left hand real fast. I mean, he just put it up, like, by his chest, his finger, and he kind of made a circular motion. And I took that to mean I'm rolling. And I could tell he was excited. So I turned around, and all I see is this tree shaking, and I thought, oh, boy, something's rubbing. We definitely got something bigger, because there's no way Jared would get that excited if he wasn't. Right. Well, lo and behold, the deer isn't big. He wasn't huge. He wouldn't have scored much. But for cool factor, I would have taken that deer all day long. You know, he had bladed split brow tines and forked G2s and about an 8-inch inside point on his left side. He was just a gnarly thing.
Right.
And I had to walk about 3 or 4 feet away from the tree I was hiding behind to get a clearing, and I shot just under his armpit there, and I misjudged the distance. And you do that a lot on the ground.
Right.
So thankfully Jared cut a lot of the footage out that showed what I'm about to tell you, but you know, when you shoot a deer and you get the wobbly knees and the hands kind of, you know, tremble a little bit, and you just got that excitement, that adrenaline going through your bones.
Yep.
Oh man. Well, you take that adrenaline, that excitement, and you mix it up with being freezing cold and having harbored that all like the last, you know, hour.
Right.
I mean, it all came out of me. I just let it go, and all of a sudden I could hardly stand straight or talk straight. I was shaking.
Right.
And I told Jared, I'm like, boy, I hope you cut that, because it's going to look like that deer had me all riled up, and it did. But it was a comfort thing too. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. There's more to the story than just the adrenaline.
Yeah. And anybody listening that's out there right now, you know, there's thousands of people who would do just about anything to have an opportunity to hunt, you know, with Whitetail Adrenaline and be in the woods with Jared. And as much of a friend as I am to him, I'm also one of those people who, you know, I cherished every single minute I was out there with him. I learned a lot from him.
Right.
You know, you never stop learning in this game.
Right.
And you know, when I missed that deer and that camera was rolling, I'd be lying if I didn't say I was tormenting myself inside. Like, how could you screw it up? Here you had this opportunity to film with one of like the coolest groups out there. And I'm a little biased, so anybody that's not affiliated to Whitetail Adrenaline, you know, no disrespect, but I just love the heck out of it. And here I was on, you know, I had my chance and I blew it.
Gotcha.
And you know, so you're kicking yourself. And you know, when you hunt a lot on the ground, and you kind of get used to, you know, screwing things up, because you bump deer all the time, and you got to get used to letting it go and moving on to find the next one. So I tried to project that as much as I could while the camera was going. And again, there's nothing scripted. I mean, the cameras are rolling all the time, all the time.
Okay.
And it catches your raw emotion and what you're thinking. And you can't tell, you know, Jared, what to use and what not to use. You can, but it doesn't mean he's going to listen to you. And that's fine.
Right.
Because he wants to capture the realness of it. So I try to get across the message like, all right, let's move on to the next one. You know, no big deal. But boy, was I hurting the unit inside, man. I was a hurting unit for sure. Well, it wasn't 30 minutes later I ended up getting redemption. So it was a happy camper that night.
Right. Gotcha. That's awesome. There's so much emotion that goes into this stuff as it plays out, and it makes you feel alive is what it comes down to. And I don't know anything else on you know, it's an adventure. The adrenaline, that's what makes you know that, you know, you're actually a being in the middle of something. You know, this is what you're supposed to feel, and it triggers some kind of biological response that you know you're in the game.
God, yeah, there's a ton of emotion that goes into it. The effort, all of the energy expended. I mean, all right, it's time away from your family. It's one-on-one time for you to exercise your passion. I mean, really just soak it in. You got so much invested. Your legs are killing you. You're cold 1 minute. You're hot the next. You're all sorts of uncomfortable, but there's no place you'd rather be than right there in that moment. And you know, you're in charge of writing, you know, the script. Right. And sometimes it goes as planned, and more times than not, it doesn't. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, both in, you know, muskie fishing and hunting, I constantly going through trial and so much error that, you know, I could bore you to death talking about all the failed opportunities. But that's how you learn, and I'm all for learning, and I love having a story to tell. So sometimes the best stories are not always the most successful ones.
Let's put this in perspective for everybody that's listening. I mean, you tend to see all the kills shots. You know, you tend to hear about all the successful hunts. If you had to narrow it down, let's talk numbers. What's your fail to success ratio? How often do you fail before you succeed?
Man, I mean, there's been seasons where I hunted, you know, 2 or 3 times and I found success, and every time that's happened, it's so rare, but every time it happens, I think, how did that just go down? Because on a average season, I might sit 35 to 45 times before I get over the top or, close enough to something that I want to shoot. And that really should put it into perspective. Man, I mean, I was hunting a deer that was shot by a neighbor on a private farm that scored over 190 inches, and they called him Chicken Foot, and this deer was gorgeous. I called him Chicken Foot because he had flyers off the back of his bases, almost like triple main beam, on one side, where he had like 11-inch flyers, but they stemmed off from the base as though they were their own, like antler or something. And then there's the main beam, and then there was an eye guard, a wicked eye guard that had a split on it. Just a cool looking thing. But if you make the peace sign, or no, not the peace sign, but I don't know, the West Coast sign,
Right.
with the W with your hand.
Right.
That's kind of what his base looked like, and that's why we call him Chicken Foot, like a back scratcher. Well, anyways, and by the way, I'm not much into naming my deer.
Yeah.
It's just that one in particular just was too good not to call him that. So,
Sure.
But anyways, but I hunted that thing so hard, it took a strain on my relationship. I think my wife had about enough, to the point where it's like, do you love me more than the deer or the deer more than me?
Right.
Well, of course the answer is you, honey, but I'm on a mission, and everything I've got is built into this, and I just want to see it through. I spent, I think, over 40 different sits between mornings and evenings chasing that deer, trying to get the edge on him. And the closest I got was 20 yards, and I couldn't get a clean shot. And then I ended up hitting a branch on my one time I did have a shot at 30 yards. And then the third time he was at 70 yards, and I couldn't get him in because he had a hot doe with him. And the next day the neighbor killed him. But I mean, it depends. It's always like everything. You can understand. You guys are hunters. You guys know it's always situational. But I mean, the ratio is definitely skewed for the majority of us. It's like, especially if you're a hang and hunt kind of a person or a ground hunter, because you're typically walking into a piece or a section of a property that either you haven't been into before because you've been leaving it lay low, but you're going in on a hunch that you're planning or you're scouting from either from the sky, on aerials or online or whatever, or just from past experience is going to pay off. And more than 9 out of 10 times, you might not even see a deer. But that's hunting. And if you ever stop pursuing, then I don't know what it should be called, but I don't know if I'd call it hunting. It'd be boring to me.
Right. Gotcha. Well, that just puts a very good perspective on what hunting should be like. So that I think we always get kind of skewed opinions based off of the TV shows that we watch, and because we want to show the action shots, so to speak. But there's a lot that goes into that action shot and if you're trying to live up to all what you see on TV and assume that that's the real life, it's not. It's that.
No, and yeah.
A lot of trial and error along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. As much of a voice as I can have to make sure that folks realize that if you're out there to try to shoot the TV deer that you see all the time, and you're only successful if you actually shoot one of those that scores, in the upper register, then you got to ask yourself, and there's guys out there who are very humble and that only shoot big deer because it doesn't matter to them if they shoot a big deer or not. They don't want to just shoot a deer simply to fill their tag and to claim success. They genuinely love hunting to death, but if they shoot a deer, they want it to be big. I completely understand that and respect it. But I feel so sorry when I hear people say, that they're not proud of their deer because it's not as big as what somebody else killed, or it doesn't live up to somebody else's standards. And then you got to ask yourself, or the person that you're talking to, do you hunt for yourself, or do you hunt for somebody else? And I can speak for myself and say that I hunt strictly for myself, but I love sharing the hunt with people. That's why I film, and that's why I write, because I want to share the experience. But social media has been beating the death out of some of the younger hunters out there, and some folks that maybe just new to hunting who are excited about their kill, and they social media is such an easy platform to share. So they get on there and they post a picture, and then you got a handful of guys, hiding behind a computer screen from hundreds of miles away or thousands of miles away, just bashing the heck out of them. Why would you shoot that deer?
Right.
And nobody knows everybody's story. Complete strangers. It just boggles my mind, and it's really sad.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's all relative, and there should never be a comparison. It's more about just sharing your experience and your story, not about comparing your kill to somebody else's. That's not what it's about.
Absolutely.
So, Sam, tell me where we can find some of your DVDs and your videos if we're listening to this.
Sure.
And we want to see some of this stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, so last year was my first season filming with Whitetail Adrenaline, and I'm going to be filming with them again this year. So, if you pick up the last season of Whitetail Adrenaline, it's called Defiant. That is an awesome DVD. The bow edition is 4.5 hours long. It's 2 discs, and that's got a handful of awesome hunts between my Minnesota canoe buck with Jared, and then Shay's Iowa Bruiser and Chansey and Jared's like amazing adventures out into the Kansas grasslands, that prairie land, and that monster that Jared killed with his longbow, and Chansey with that buck that he hit in the ear, and then experiencing the lowest of the lows that I was telling you about. When you miss a deer, it's hard enough, but when you miss it with Whitetail Adrenaline, especially your first season, then it really hurts. But then, he came up big and he shot a great big 8-pointer at 20 yards, in some grass that's hardly over your knees. What a phenomenal DVD that is.
Right.
I hunt with Wisconsin Whitetail Pursuit. That is a core group of guys. It's like, I think 7 or 8 of us guys, and then a lady, and she'd probably hit me if she heard me calling her a lady. I don't know. She's a lady. she's a mom. She's not a little girl, but she's not old either. She's in her 20s, mid-20s. Anyways, Wisconsin Whitetail Pursuit's cool. I mean, it's the core of Wisconsin. Wisconsin is so rich in the culture of deer hunting. So this really embodies it. We try to do our best to embody it anyways, where we show the adventure. We show the misses, we show the occasional bad shot, and we show the successes in the path that we took to get there, and everything in between, and try to find relatability with Wisconsin folks who, can appreciate, having a beer after a successful weekend of hunting, or shooting the bull with the neighboring farmer or something, and, just the good stuff.
Right.
So that's, you can find, there's 4 seasons of DVDs with Wisconsin Whitetail Pursuit. And then this year we're doing a semi-live web series that you can catch our latest hunts on. The first episode of it's episode 5.1. You'll see my doe kill from the second day of the Wisconsin archery season, and then with my new man bow.
New man bow. That's funny.
Yeah, and then you see another a newcomer to the group shoot a palmated buck in southwestern Wisconsin. And then episode 2 just came out, and there's a guy who shoots a nice doe, and it's called the Sap Shack, and it's probably one of the spookiest looking ground blinds you ever did see. It's, I don't know how many guys make a Sap Shack into a deer hunting blind, but he sure did, and it made for pretty cool footage. And then episode 3 is going up this Friday with my buck kill from last week Friday. So again, we try to keep it as semi-live as possible. And then I've got my own YouTube channel, and I admit I've got 2 channels out there, and it's only because I forgot my login credentials before I,
Yep.
So I created another one.
Yeah.
So I got a few videos out there, but I've got a lot more in my hard drive that I should probably share.
Gotcha. All right, that's very cool, man. All right, let's get into the 10 rapid fire questions. These kind of our closing segment, and it gets to just questions to get to know you a little bit better. So,
all right, let's do it.
If you're ready. All right, what's your number 1 hunting tip of all time?
Number 1 hunting tip of all time is don't get too caught up with scent control. I'm not huge on scent control. in the sense that I don't, and I'm not bashing any products. I don't by any means mean to make it sound that way. But I used to think that I needed to buy, all the latest soaps and detergents and sprays and wafers and that kind of stuff to get away with sitting wherever I wanted to. And what I learned was that it doesn't work. When you talk about the amount of olfactors in a deer's nose and the fact that, they can smell how many times better than a German Shepherd used for drug, sniffing.
Yep.
You could go roll around in cow poop and then go sit and get sprayed by a skunk and go sit in your tree stand upwind from where a deer is. And mark my words, they will smell that skunk, they will smell the cow poop, and they will smell human. They can separate smells. So a lot of guys will say, well, I've killed deer that were dead downwind of me. And my response is, well, you got lucky because, he let you get away with it, or she let you get away with it. They might not be always reacting the same way to it, but the last thing I ever want to do is risk having a big buck go downwind of me, and smelling me, and just hope that he puts up with my scent and gives me a shot. So when it comes to scent control, my number one tip is play the wind. Play the wind.
Very good. All right. We all have these things that we take into the woods with us. Maybe they're good luck charms. Maybe there's something useful that you bring with you besides your weapon. What's that one thing that you can't live without?
Yeah, one thing I can't live without. I can't go into the woods without a knife. I need to have my knife.
Gotcha. All right. What's your biggest pet peeve in life?
Oh, in life, just not even hunting specific?
Yep.
Man, it is bad drivers. I can't stand. My wife yells at me all the time about this. I'm working on it. I admit I'm working on it. But for the life of me, I can't understand some of the things that I experience on the roads. People cutting people off and going, speeding up just to slow down between stoplights and that kind of thing. I don't know why I let that get to me, but I'm guilty of being annoyed by that.
Okay, you're guilty of that. All right, you're at a hunting convention somewhere in the country. You meet a stranger in the hotel lobby. You strike up a conversation. They ask you what you do for a living. What do you say?
I let them know that I'm in computer nerdery. I'm an analyst, and I work in analytics and operational excellence in corporate America. And people look at me with their head cocked, and they don't know what to say. So trust me, I've had that conversation many times.
Gotcha.
So yeah, and that's about that.
That's funny.
I try to divert from that question as much as I can, because it's not one of those jobs that you learned about in college, or your parents told you should be. It's not like a fireman or a policeman or something.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally understand. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
A hard-boiled egg.
Excellent. You can have your own billboard on the side of a highway. It's a blank canvas. You can say anything you want. What do you say?
Oh boy, I'd think of something to say that you can write in as little letters as possible and the biggest word possible. So I'd probably write "be nice" in big bold letters, because we're going back to that discussion about all the bashing I've been seeing on social media about people's deer not measuring up to what other people's standards are. Bullying sucks. I was not bullied, but it makes me pretty upset when I see it, and I'm pretty defensive to come to the aid of people I witness getting bullied.
Yep.
Try not to do it online, because I don't want to, get all wrapped up in other people's business too much. But boy, does that just bother me. So be nice to people. So be nice.
Gotcha.
Period.
Love it. All right. If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops into your head, and why?
First person I thought of just now when you said successful is my wife, and that's because I just told her that I think she's awfully successful. We just celebrated our 8-year wedding anniversary yesterday, and I was sitting across from her at the dinner table, and I said that I'm inspired by her success, not only in the business world, but becoming the woman that I've witnessed her to become over the last 13 years we've been together, and in entering motherhood and seeing what an incredible person she is.
Oh, very nice. Very, very nice. All right. What's a day in the life of Sam Ubl looks like?
Well, it's a lot of wake up early with the baby and not enough sleep and then go to work all day and come home and prepare to go back and do it the next day. But that's the less exciting part. I spend a lot of my time during the day when I'm not thinking about the things that need to be done immediately at the office or odd jobs at home. I think about what I'm going to cook for dinner, and I think about what way the wind is blowing all the time. I can't not pay attention to the weather even after my tag is filled. It's like that when I'm fishing too, and which way the wind is blowing and what I'm going to cook for dinner. It's like, I love the outdoors and I love knowing what's going on outside, and I love cooking. It's my therapy after a long day of work. So that's kind of like the day.
Gotcha. All right. Very good. All right. So things change when deer season arrives. What's a deer hunting day in your life look like?
Oh man, that gets complicated.
Yes.
A day for me, it's always different. I never know what I'm doing going into it. I mean, I have a plan. A lot of times my plan changes based on weather conditions. Most of the time it comes down to wind, and then seasonal. But in the actual event of the day, say I get done working, the last thing I think about, I'll say, is going home and showering and getting like scent-proof clothes on. All I'm thinking about is what way is the wind blowing and where am I going to go and be effective. And I'm not just thinking about wherever I decide to prop myself up to sit or something. I'm thinking about everything from that wind tells me everything I need to know. How is the crosswind potentially going to affect my entrance? Like, am I going to be winded by bedded deer before I even get up in my tree? Or if I'm getting close to a deer's bedroom, is it going to smell me before I even get up close? That's the kind of thing I'm thinking about.
Gotcha. All right. Very good. All right. So those are the 10 rapid fire questions, and you did well.
Awesome.
So thanks for going through that. Dusty, do you have any final questions for Sam?
I don't, but I'll tell you what, Sam, you really opened up and thoroughly answered our questions, and that's much appreciated.
Hey, guys, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know we'll probably talk longer than you normally do, but I sure appreciate the genuine interest.
The way those guys go about deer hunting is not what you think you would do if you watch deer hunting TV all the time. These guys just have the grit. I don't know how else to describe it. They just go out and do it, and they don't care about all the fluff stuff. They just go out and hunt with whatever they have, and they get it done.
Yeah, it's quite amazing, really.
It is. It's kind of like, well, why do we need all this other stuff?
Right, and I'm always curious to what kind of vehicle they're rolling in. I mean, I'm telling you, they got some units over there.
Yes, they do, and they have a whole variety of them. It seems like whatever broke down in between seasons has now been expired. It's been basically sent off to the junkyard, and they'll find some other thing that they fixed up, and that's their hunting unit for the season until that one breaks down.
Yeah, one time they had this big old van.
Yep.
The next thing you know, they're rolling in a Suburban.
Yep.
Now they're back in a minivan.
It's
great. It's the greatest things to slice bread, Jay. I'm telling you.
Right. And they don't. I guess they don't get caught up in all the fluff. Like it's just hardcore hunting is when it comes down to. And I love that about them. The public stuff and the bow hunting and the rudimentary tools that they use. Yet they still kill big whitetails year in, year out. So
it's quite amazing.
Of all the shows you want to try to pay attention to, it's this one with Sam and the shows with Jared Scheffler. Unbelievable, blow your mind, and you'll learn about how they do it. So you can do it too. Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week this week?
Yes, I do, Jay.
The Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used firearms, bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
You're a public land hunter. And you walk in and you see tree stands and for people and activities. People's been through there. Hunters have been through there. Just because you see that, don't get discouraged. Keep a positive attitude and go in there and go beyond where you see the foot activity. Too many times where I hear guys that hunt public land tell me that, hey, man, I went and checked my spot where I normally hunt, and there was footprints in there. It looked like somebody just been through there that morning. And I said, that's a good possibility. They may have been there. But did you go beyond where you thought they might have went? Well, what do you mean, they say? I say, you got to get a little bit beyond where the average guy goes. And they said, well, I never really thought about that. I seen footprints and just said the heck with it and rolled out of there. And I said, no, you can't be like that. You got to stay positive and you got to dig a little deeper.
Right.
So if you're a public land hunter and you're walking in, let's say you're going in a couple hundred yards, you're seeing footprints and maybe running somebody's tree stand that they left up, and you got to go beyond that. You got to look at the big picture. Most guys are not going to put the effort in to walk farther back in that public piece of land and hunt. Maybe you got to get there a little earlier to make that farther trek, but in the long run, it'll pay off.
Awesome tip, man. That's so true. You do have to go beyond what you thought or where you thought you should go. That is, I can't tell you how often I have good encounters when I push myself to the limits of the boundaries.
That's amazing. You just got to put that extra effort in the long run, it'll pay off.
Very good tip. Well, thank you very much to ScentLock Enforcer for sponsoring the show. Thank you to the Eurohanger for sponsoring the Deer News. And thank you to Morse's Sporting Goods for sponsoring the Chubby Tines Tip of the Week. Dusty, where can we find you when we're not hanging out here in Big Buck Studios?
Shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. Look me up on Facebook, facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors, or hit me up on Instagram @ChasingAntler. Jay, where can we find you when you're not on the mic here in Big Buck Studio?
Best place is to shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com. And if you would like to be a part of our huge following on Facebook, or the contingent of the Big Buck Registry, the diehard deer hunting fans, go to bigbuckregistry.com/Facebook, and you'll see all the bucks being shared as we speak. If you would like to share your big buck as well, maybe you've had some success this season. Maybe you've had some success this season because you listened to the show and you learned a thing or two. Well, if you have, and you'd like to share your big buck picture with the rest of the world and the rest of the contingent, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all the instructions will be there as well. And basically the instructions are this: send in a picture of you and your big buck. Don't send in just a picture of your buck. Don't send in just a picture of you. Send in a picture of you with your buck. Give me your first name. Give me the state of kill and the year of kill, and we'll take care of the rest. We'll take a quick look at it just to make sure it looks okay. And next thing you know, you'll be notified if you send it in by email or Facebook mail. We'll notify you when it's going up. If you just upload it, we really don't have a way to notify you. But we post about 5 to 6 pictures a day. And if you made the cut, we'll definitely let you know. You can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/BigBuckRegistry, Instagram, Instagram.com/BigBuckRegistry. We're on YouTube, YouTube.com/BigBuckRegistry. If you would like to listen to this show, there are multiple ways to do it. One way is through iTunes. So if you're an Apple user, go to the podcast app and you can look up Big Buck Registry in the search bar. You can go to iHeartRadio. You can go to Stitcher. You can go to Google+. You can also now go to YouTube, because every single show that we create, even though it's audio, we convert it to a video. So you can actually listen to the show on YouTube. And last but not least, if you would like to become a patron, if you would like to be one of those diehard deer hunting fans that loves the show and you find value in this show, we could use your support. Each and every week, we ask that if you love the show enough, if you could just donate a little bit, $1, $5 per month, $10, if you whatever you have that you think you can spare, that you think is worth your money to listen to the show. That's how we, in part, make this show happen. There are expenses, there are costs, travel costs. There are costs that we have to produce this show. We have hosting fees, internet fees. There are a lot of things little things add up. So we're asking you to join the cause so that we can keep bringing you good content each and every week. And if you would like to join and become a patron of the show, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/pledge. That's bigbuckregistry.com/pledge, and all the instructions are right there. You'll hit our Patreon account, and then you can see what you can do from there. Dusty, I think that is a wrap, my friend.
That's a whole lot of big buck, Jay.
It really is. It really is. And we're going to do it again next week, but it's time to sign off for now. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Can't wait.